Franklin has his bat signal, and we have our breaking news graphic. Whenever there is something big going on, you know the breaking news graphic is not far behind. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. Sean Fitz with us, and today what we're breaking down is another commitment in the class of 2024. So, Fitz, what do we got going on here today for the Nittany Lions?
We know that breaking news graphic evokes the same emotions as the James Franklin tweet, so I'm sure people are pumped to see that. Penn State with its fifth commitment in the class of 2024. Connecticut tight end Luke Reynolds. Reynolds just picked up an offer from the Nittany Lions last weekend. This is one that we talked about on the recruiting show earlier this week in the sense of a guy that makes a ton of sense to end up in Penn State's class. The logic is all there. A bit under the radar, as you see by the graphic, with no ranking right now as we record. That's going to probably change by the time this thing goes live. But Reynolds, a guy that's in the mold of a Tyler Warren. He's an athletic guy, plays a lot of quarterback for his high school, and they're going to transition to tight end, but he's got the physical tools. He's come and camped for the staff, actually camped for the staff as a quarterback last year, but put up some numbers that are pretty far in line with Mr. Warren.
Yeah, I'd say the describing overarching theme here of Luke Reynolds is there's not a ton of information about Luke Reynolds. I'll rip the Band-Aid off right now. There is, I think, one game of his that I've been able to find on the internet. And so, T. Frank's Film Room, we'll see if we can scrounge enough together. But when it comes to the overall prospect, I think you're absolutely right when it comes to New England tight end. Is it closer to Pat Freiermuth? Is it closer to Tyler Warren? And there's a lot of similarities from the quarterback perspective, but also from kind of the rawness perspective of Reynolds. And this is a player that Penn State really likes, right? This kind of mold of just a giant ball of clay.
Yes. You look at his highlights. He's running a lot of traditional quarterback because I think he's the best athlete. He's the best player. He's the best player in the field up there. But you look at kind of some of the stuff he does, and Pat Freiermuth did some of that stuff. Andrew Rapley did some of that stuff. I think it's a product of the environment. You're just that much better and that much more athletic than everyone else. A good runner. The size is there. He's over 6'4". He's 215. He's got all the reach in the hands and all the kind of stuff that you're looking for in checking those boxes. Ran a 4.6 flat for Penn State last year at camp. Pretty darn good at that size for a rising junior at that point. So he's got a lot to like in terms of explosion, speed, quickness, and things like that. So a lot of these things align. Just hasn't played a lot of tight end. That's where it changes this year. You look at what they've got at Cheshire Academy, his school. He played quarterback last year. He's not going to have to do that this year. Dante Reno, who was committed to South Carolina as a quarterback in the class of 2024, has transferred there. So Reynolds is going to get a chance to actually play the position. I know it's crazy to think about it, but play the position that he's going to be playing in college this year. And I think he's one of those guys scratching the surface of what he can do as a tight end, just because he hasn't done it all that often. So now that he can switch his focus, he can camp, he can work with Ty Howell at camp, he can come in and sort of make himself into a tight end. That there's a lot to like in that. It's not unlike Joey Schlaffer. Joey has played in a similar role as a Wildcat quarterback, not full-time quarterback like Luke Reynolds has, but these guys that develop and play different positions, play a bunch of sports, do a lot of those things is what Penn State is looking for in the tight end room. And it's part of the reason they've been so successful in building that out.
So we talk about the run that Penn State has been going on at tight end, and you just mentioned a bunch of those guys, all the way back to Mike Gesicki, Pat Freiermuth, Brenton Strange. We just saw a pro day just a little bit ago, where he, I think, performed really well as a route runner and what he did in field drills. Luke Reynolds, underrated at this point because he's not rated. Like, he hasn't really received a lot of attention. Is he a dark horse to be another one in that long line of really successful, versatile, productive Penn State tight ends? Or is this like kind of a long-term project? How would you rate him in terms of your view of his potential and his fit at Penn State?
I think he's just going to rise, to be honest with you. Like, he hasn't done it yet. And already we have the athletic numbers and the size to work with. So there's a good base to work with there. He's going to continue to get better. We're going to see ball skills. They're going to go out and see him in the spring evaluation period and, make another, basically a second evaluation on him, but it seems to be elevating. Just his track seems to be elevating. So that's good. I think that, it might take a while. If I were to ballpark, and we're recording this, he probably will have an offer by the time, or excuse me, probably will have a rating by the time this goes up. But I'm thinking in 87 would be appropriate here. That mid to high 3-star, just because we haven't seen much of it on tape in terms of him being a tight end. There's a couple catches on his huddle. But yeah, for the most part, he's a mystery, which is actually pretty cool. Like,
Yeah.
he's playing in a different area. The Connecticut, New England prep school scene has produced some legitimate talent. And when you're one of the better athletes in that league or in that region, then this is the sort of thing that can bubble up. I keep going back to Tyler Warren. He's not as big as Tyler. Tyler's 6'6". Reynolds probably going to be 6'4". Maybe grows a little bit more, but that's kind of that mold, kind of that guy that has to learn to play tight end. And when he does that, you can use his athleticism. You can use him in different ways. Like I said, he camped as a quarterback. He wasn't bad as a quarterback. He just wasn't a Division I quarterback. Now he'll have a Division I quarterback prospect throwing him the ball. So I think that there's a lot to like in terms of his trajectory here. I think that he's a guy that when schools would see him in the spring evaluation period or get him on campus for a camp or something in June, that eventually would pick up some pretty big offers. And he's got a good offer list now. I think Virginia Tech was heavily in the mix. Some other schools, and Virginia Tech has a guy that is an offensive coordinator that sort of built Penn State's room up.
Yeah, knows a thing or two about tight ends, does he?
He does. And I hope he's not listening, but because he'll just throw that one back in my face. But no, I think there's a lot to like here. And I think his trajectory is going up. And I think that's the thing to take away from Luke Reynolds. And, maybe he's a secret now, but in a couple of months, that might not be the case.
Yeah, I generally characterize 3 stars in two different ways. It's a 3-star that has maxed out his ceiling because he's a really good football player, and you want to give respect to what he's able to do. And then there's the 3-star that is an absolute raw prospect, and you have no idea what he's going to be. So do you want to overshoot and make him a 4-star or high 4-star based just on his physical potential? And I think Penn State does a great job of identifying guys that aren't just physical tools in that kind of mold of a 3-star that has potential, but also has the ability to realize that potential. And some of the things I picked up on when it comes to Luke Reynolds, just seeing his highlight film and some of the stuff he's able to do, great body control. I mean, you can see that in a bunch of different ways for a guy that is new to the tight end position. Hands, no idea. But when he's going up and getting the ball, contested catch does not seem to bother him against admittedly smaller defenders and smaller defensive backs at his level, but still the ability to find the ball in the air, track it, catch it, and then after the catch, I think there's going to be some positive ability there because, as you mentioned, great athlete, but just also a natural feel for setting people up and making people miss. I don't think he's going to be a huge, like a Travis Kelce after the catch. And we always go to like the apex of these things, but I don't think he's going to be necessarily that, but he's going to fit somewhere in that mold of can catch and run. Might not be the Theo Johnson deep threat, get down the seam on every single play. Could be somewhere in there. But as you said, very very high ceiling, and the future is open to him in that area. The recruitment here, we've talked about the tight end room before, bluewhiteillustrated.com and here on YouTube. Watching the video, please like the video and subscribe to Blue White Illustrated here on YouTube and over at bluewhiteillustrated.com. I know that's a lot of things to tell you right now, but if you sign up to all the things, you'll get all the information. That's the best way to put it. Right. How has this relationship developed? Because this feels like, as you mentioned, a pretty quick turnaround from a guy that cropped up on the radar, now part of the class. So how did this recruitment and this relationship develop?
Well, I think part of this is Penn State's approach at tight end in 2024. They took at least 2 last year. Mega Barnwell's a tight end right now. I'm not sure where he lands in terms of position. But Schlaffer came in January. You have Rapley coming in May. Jerry Cross ahead of them. Khalil Dinkins ahead of. So it's I don't want to call it a traffic jam, but there's a lot of tight ends in there. So taking what they took last year, you would think maybe one this year. Like, it wasn't a huge priority. Not that they, you want to take a tight end in every class, but like, you want to take the right tight end if you're going to take just one. You've got Caleb Odom coming in for an official visit. And I think that's really testament to the staff and the relationship that they've got, because this guy is going to be big time. He's going to be a top 5 tight end, and he's from the South. So he's going to end up staying South. Like that's the logical data points that we're putting in here. Alabama offered, Auburn offered, Georgia offered. They got some things going for them down South. So, Caleb Odom, while you have an official visit, I don't think that's one you want to bank on. There's a couple other guys that have been out there. Brady Priestcorn, we've talked a lot about. He's probably going to end up at Michigan. There's a lot drawing him to Michigan, and Michigan's hot right now. So, like, logically, this seems to be the next step. I think he fits into that room athletically. He can fit in there with size. He's probably a little bit bigger than Brenton Strange, at this point. So, Is that the type of player he's going to turn into? It's hard to say. I don't know. But yeah, I think that that's how that sort of came together, and that Penn State was looking at its options, say, hey, we got some good options out there going big game hunting at that position, but we've also got this guy that we think is going to blow up. And so Ty Howell put that work in, the recruiting staff put that work in. And I think that that's how you landed here with him on campus last week. You get a visual, you see the guy, you see his frame, you see him holding 255 pounds or 250 pounds or whatever he's eventually going to be, and you feel good about that, then that's the move you got to make. From his standpoint, like we've seen this before. We've seen guys come on campus, pick up that offer, say, okay, I'm going to go visit Pitt, Virginia Tech, Louisville, wherever else he planned on going this spring. You think about it and you're like, I'm going to end up at Penn State anyway. Actually, Rapley had this conversation with us on the podcast a couple of months ago, and he didn't get that chance because Neo Avery took his spot. But obviously, eventually that came around. But this is a situation where, things are just like, hey, I'm going to end up at Penn State. I might as well jump on board right now. And that's what Luke Reynolds did.
So one last thing that I want to get to right now, I think it's important we're at the end of March. Penn State has now 5 commitments in the class. I think some Penn State fans probably are a little worried. This class, this is the third, we'll call it 3-star player, but generally a lower ranked class than where they were last year, and especially 2022. So how do you view Penn State's start to the class of 2024 compared to the last 2 classes?
Based on the start, I think there's a couple of guys who can rise, including Reynolds. But yeah, I think it's a solid base to go with. It's not the flashy start that we've seen in past years, and that's fine. You can get there. Half of the top 10 right now in the On3 team rankings have 5 or fewer commits. So like this is kind of on par. There's a couple other schools. Michigan's on a run right now. I know there's just a couple of other schools that are good in number. Georgia's got 10 commits, but Georgia always takes guys really, really far in advance. So it's not an outlier in that. Penn State started the day at number 18 in the team rankings, and that seems about right. I mean, you're looking at an average star ranking high in the 3 stars right now. So it's not the flashy start that I think a lot of people like. Not a panic situation. There are still some positions they absolutely need to not get moving on, but work on. Wide receivers, things like that will come together eventually. Defensive line is going to be such a huge part of this class, and they don't have a defensive lineman in this class yet. So I think that's where you're at. I think that gives you a little bit more roster flexibility with the transfer portal. That's how that kind of works. So I think they're in a fine spot right now. I'm not panicking in that situation.
So as things develop, as more players commit, of course, here, Blue White Illustrated on YouTube is where you can get your breaking news videos. But if you want to go directly to the source, bluewhiteillustrated.com, make sure you subscribe. And wherever we are, social media, our website here on YouTube, make sure you plug into what we're doing. Sean Fitz, thank you so much for being here on the show. That is Luke Reynolds, the latest commit in the class of 2023. With more commitments, we'll have more information. Until then, we'll be back.